Okay, so Mittegram is a trade finance platform. And it's a platform that we started developing about 5 years ago, working with two large corporates, Volvo and Ericsson. And the challenge from them was, hey, look, when we contact our banks and request from our banks some pricing for whatever trade finance need we have to either log into various portals, or we send everything via email or telephone calls, none of which is recorded in our system. So what we need is a system that provides that sort of governance, but also improves the workflow, reduces the amount of time that we take to make those requests and get the responses for it. So we are a bank agnostic platform. So any corporate can contact any bank using Mittegram. Clearly, it's beneficial to the banks if they're on the platform, but they do not need to be on the platform for a corporate to use Mittegram to make those contacts. And what do we deliver? Well, we simplify this RFQ process. We deliver a centralized network control, and the transaction data is available for the future. That gives you a lot of insights, a lot of transparency, and a great deal of analytics that you can then dive into to try and understand what it is that you're missing and how you can improve your business. We support a number of different forms of trade finance instruments. They're listed here. Corporates requests from banks, corporates requests to banks are things like issuing an import LC, discounting an export LC, confirming an export LC, issuing guarantees, requesting reissuance of guarantees, and so on and so forth. And banks can do the same thing. They have the same benefits. One bank can ask its selection of correspondent banks to reissue bid bonds, performance bonds, advance payment guarantees in local markets where it perhaps doesn't have a presence. And it can request that receivables that it's taken onto its portfolios are risk mitigated using credit insurance. So how does it all start? Well, it starts with a user at a corporate putting some information into a boilerplate like this. In addition to this, a user can drag and drop non-structured data. You can take a SWIFT that's come in, perhaps a letter of credit, drag and drop it onto this screen, and this screen will consume the information. A tabular format, if there's a table that perhaps you use with a number of fields on it, that also can be dragged and dropped. And completely unstructured data, such as an email, you can do the same thing. So there are ways of improving the speed and efficiency with which that is done. This is the Mittegram experience. This is a log-on screen. This is the landing page for a corporate. And what it shows me here is the number of Mittegrams that I have. And by the way, we call each one of these an outgoing or a request for quotation, a Mittegram, and it's also the name of the platform. So we've got drafts, and these are the drafts down here, the transactions that I haven't yet sent out. This part here will be where I've requested pricing, and this is where the pricing has started coming back from the banks. And as you click your way through, so these would of course update. The chat functionality on Mittegram is actually quite important and is very heavily used. And it's split into two parts. There's general chit chat between corporates and banks, asking questions about things. And then specifically, every transaction gets stamped with a number when it first originates. And those numbers will appear when there's a specific piece of chat going on between a corporate and its bank. The same thing is available between banks or between financial institutions. So one financial institution can request another financial institution to reissue a bid bond, a performance bond, and it can, and you have this same thing. It is a bank agnostic or it's a client agnostic system. And if you are a bank on the platform, you would therefore have two sets: incoming Mittegrams that are received from the market, and outgoing Mittegrams that you're sending out. And of course, the workflow efficiency improves even more, because if you receive a request to issue a bid bond, you can drag and drop it over here and send it out to your correspondent banks very quickly. So you don't have to input all that information a second time. Governance kicks in first and foremost where you set up your networks. So as you set up a network, you put all the names of all of the people you contact regularly, some of whom are on the platform, some of whom are off the platform. As I say, it doesn't really matter. You can then drag and drop those individuals into different groups, which of course improves the speed with which you can contact the individuals in those groups. One click to contact everybody in my LC's Asia group for all the Vietnamese export LCs that I'm receiving. And then what that creates as you start with any one transaction is an audit trail. So down here it would say that I've created a Mittegram, I've shared it internally with a number of my colleagues, I've sent it to various individuals at the banks requesting for quotations. The quotations have come back and it's all listed here. Up above is a summary of the transaction, and so everything's in one place. If you're not around that day, if you leave the organization, it doesn't matter because it's not sitting in your Outlook inbox, outbox, or anywhere else, so you haven't lost that data. It's all available to whoever is permissioned and entitled to use that data. I'm sorry, this clicker's a little bit slow. So what do we do with all that data? Well, obviously, this is the additive piece that comes in, because having transparency. I was at a meeting about 6 months ago, and there was somebody from McKinsey who was talking to an audience about this size, and he was saying, you know, banks sit on huge amounts of data. Corporates have enormous databases full of, and we use about 2% of it. That was their study, not mine. And clearly, I think that we don't use maybe even 2%, maybe we only use 1%, and we're sort of sitting here with all this data. What can we do with it? Well, we sat down and we've started to work out what do we need to know? We need to know who we're dealing with, volumes we're dealing with them. I want to know why my banks can't do business with me. If I've shown them business and they're rejecting it, I want to understand the reasons why. Mitigram allows that. I want to understand the amount of wallet share I'm giving to each bank, because I want to reciprocate if they've given me balance sheet, if they're on my RCF, if they've got extended bilateral facilities, if they're in my syndicated lending facilities. If they're giving me money, I need to be able to give them something back for it. I can analyze all of that, and I can show that to them. Banks, on the other hand, can see wallet share. They can understand how much business they're getting. They can see market share as well. And they can also see how their pricing compares with the rest of the market. So there's just a few screens here that sort of gives us some examples of the analytics that are available. This is all live. This is all available to any of our users. So I was on a platform about 3 months ago in Helsinki with the corporate treasurer from one of the large telcos. And he was saying, look, we use Mittegram, we use it because it gives us workflow efficiency, number one, and number two, it gives us governance. So I need to be able to show every now and again to my auditors what I'm doing, with whom I'm doing, and why I'm doing it. I need to justify that. And he said that there is a value add. I tend to get lower margins. And I think there's this sort of competitive tension. If you're on a platform, you think or you feel that there's more people have been invited into a transaction. It isn't necessarily so. And by the way, our experience is, and here's a data point for you, only about 50% of the transactions end up being awarded to the best price. So the other 50% are clearly going to those banks that have the better relationships, that are extending balance sheet, that have better turnaround time on documentation, that have wider capabilities in terms of taking on credit risks. So what Mittegram doesn't do is it does not eliminate that relationship angle. There's a few of the clients that we have on the platform here. I mentioned that Ericsson was one of them that we started with, and they sort of helped us define the scope, and there are some of the banks. Just a little bit of some stats here. We've done probably about $32 billion of business over the platform over the last 3 years since we've been operational. I'm not quite sure what that works out. Probably around $2 billion a month goes across the Mittegram platform. More than 3,000 transactions in that time, risks from over 100 countries, and more than 500 LC issuing banks have been placed onto the platform. Growth rates at the moment still very strong, but this is more an investor presentation than probably a market one.